There is a moment when the heart feels that it is carrying the weight of the world, where anguish, sadness, anxiety, and tiredness seem unbearable. Maybe you felt it too, those sleepless nights when peace seems like a distant dream and the soul cries out for relief. You're not alone in this struggle. What if I told you that there's a powerful solution waiting for you that doesn't rely on fleeting distractions or empty promises? Imagine, instead, a peace so deep that it penetrates even the darkest corners of your mind. A strength that does not come from within your own limited reserves, but from a divine source that never runs dry. It's not about self-help or quick fixes. It is a deeper spiritual renewal that is transformed from the inside out. It's about finding God in a way that brings true and lasting things. On this journey, we will touch on a prayer that moves mountains, that brings the weary soul to a place of rest and restoration. It's a prayer that acknowledges where you are, but also declares where you're going, toward hope, toward healing, toward the strength that only God can provide. Are you ready to step into this moment, to cry out for the peace and strength that your heart has been longing for? Let's begin this journey together, finding the way to a heart strengthened by God Himself. When a person with an anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart turns to God, it's like a child seeking the embrace of a father during a storm. They approach not with elaborate words or complex rituals, but with a simple plea for relief. It is in this moment, in the quiet of the heart, that they feel the divine presence drawing near, offering refuge and peace. God is not distant. He is the shelter for those who feel lost, the comfort for those who are suffering. Imagine someone carrying a burden so heavy that their strength is failing. Perhaps they've endured sleepless nights, worried about the future, or have been overwhelmed by a sadness that seems unending. Then, in an act of faith, they lift their eyes and cry out to the Lord. It's not a desperate shout, but a whisper that echoes to the heavens. They don't need to understand everything, just trust that the one who created them can also restore them. It's in this place of humility and surrender that God begins to work. When the heart turns to Him, it's like opening a door to hope. It's knowing that despite the pain and uncertainty, there is a promise of strength and renewal. And even when words fail, the simple act of seeking God is already a powerful prayer. Thus, the anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart finds its first source of relief by surrendering to the presence of the Father. In the quiet moments of prayer, when one surrenders their anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart to God, there's a profound exchange that takes place. It's as if they're laying down their heaviest burdens at the feet of the Almighty. They come to God not with strength but in the rawness of their pain, saying, "Lord, this is too much for me to carry." And in that sacred space, they find that God is not only willing but eager to lift those burdens from their shoulders. Consider the person who has been carrying the weight of grief or the chains of anxiety. Each day feels like a struggle, and the heart grows heavier with each passing moment. But in this act of surrender, they offer every piece of their brokenness to God. They might not have the words to express the depth of their sorrow, but in their heart's cry, God hears it all. It's a divine transaction where the mourner gives up their pain, and God exchanges it with a peace that surpasses understanding. This surrender is not a one-time act but a daily practice. Every morning as the sun rises, they choose to release their anguish into God's hands. It's a reminder that they don't have to walk through this life alone, carrying the weight of the world. God, in His infinite love, steps in to take the load. And while the pain might not vanish overnight, there's a growing sense of strength and hope, a promise that God is actively working on their behalf. And so, the heart begins to heal, finding solace in the divine exchange that takes place each time they come before God. There comes a time when one must look into the depths of their own soul and acknowledge the weakness within. For a heart that is anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, this is not an admission of defeat but a declaration of truth. It's a moment of humility, where they recognize that they have reached the end of their own strength. And in this admission, there is a powerful realization that they don't have to be strong on their own because God's strength is made perfect in weakness. Imagine the person who has always tried to hold everything together, striving to be strong for everyone else while their own spirit crumbles. They've worn a brave face, hidden behind a mask of composure, yet inside they feel like they're unraveling. When they finally come before God, they lay down this facade and say, "Lord, I am weak, I cannot do this on my own." In that moment they experience a profound shift. The very act of admitting their frailty opens the door for God's power to move in and lift them up. This acknowledgement is not about dwelling on one's insufficiency but about recognizing the sufficiency of God. When they admit their weakness, they make room for God's strength to be displayed. It's like a vessel that must be emptied before it can be filled. As they pour out their weakness, God fills them with His strength, fortifying their spirit for the battles they face. They begin to understand that it's not about being strong all the time but about leaning on the one who is unshakable. And so, they find a new courage not in themselves, but in the God who promises to be their strength when they are weak. In the stillness of seeking God, the anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart longs for a peace that only the divine can provide. This is not the fleeting peace that the world offers, which comes and goes with the tides of circumstance. No, this is a deep, abiding peace that settles into the very core of one's being, even in the midst of life's storms. It's the kind of peace that doesn't make sense to the logical mind but is felt in the soul, a gift from the one who calms the seas with a word. Picture someone whose mind is constantly racing, thoughts tangled with worries about the future, regrets from the past, and the pressures of the present. Each day feels like a battle, fighting for a moment of calm. When they turn to God, they're not just asking for a temporary reprieve but for a transformation of their inner world. They pray, "Lord, grant me peace in this chaos." And it's here that they begin to experience something extraordinary. Slowly, like a river finding its course, peace begins to flow through their heart, quieting the noise and bringing clarity where there was confusion. This peace doesn't mean the absence of troubles but the presence of God in the midst of them. It's an anchor for the soul, holding them steady when everything else seems to be falling apart. As they continue to seek this peace each day, they find that it becomes a part of them. It changes how they respond to the world around them. Instead of being swept away by every gust of worry, they stand firm, knowing that God's peace guards their hearts and minds. And so, even in the darkest moments, they carry a light within them, a testimony of the peace that only God can give. In the midst of life's burdens, when the heart feels anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, there arises a deep yearning for relief. It's the cry of a soul that's been stretched to its limits, longing for a respite from the weight it has carried for so long. This is when one turns to God, not merely seeking an escape, but desiring a touch of His gentle hand to lift the heaviness. They say, "Lord, my heart is tired. Please bring relief to this weary soul." And in that sacred plea, they open themselves to the possibility of divine comfort. Consider someone who has walked through seasons of grief or has been entangled in the web of anxiety for years. Every step feels like an uphill climb, every breath a reminder of the weight pressing down on their chest. When they come to God, they're not asking for an immediate fix but for a release, a moment where they can exhale and let go of what they've been carrying. It's like finding an oasis in the desert. God becomes their place of rest. He doesn't promise that all troubles will vanish instantly, but He offers His presence, His strength, and a supernatural relief that surpasses human understanding. This relief comes in many forms. It might be the sudden feeling of lightness, as if a burden has been physically lifted from their shoulders. Or perhaps it's a quiet whisper in their heart, assuring them that they are not alone in their struggles. God, in His infinite wisdom, knows exactly how to bring the relief that each person needs. As they rest in Him, they find that their strength is renewed. They begin to feel the stirring of hope, a reminder that God is their refuge, ready to provide relief in ways they never expected. And so, they take another step, not in their own strength, but in the strength of the one who promises to sustain them. In the midst of an anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart, there lies a truth that often goes unnoticed: the unwavering love of God. This love is not earned by deeds or lost by failures. It is a constant, a foundation that holds firm even when everything else crumbles. When one stops to recognize this love, it changes everything. It's like stepping into the warmth of the sun after a long, cold night, realizing that this love has been there all along, waiting to embrace and heal. Imagine someone who has been wandering through life feeling unloved and unseen, carrying wounds from past rejections and betrayals. They've come to believe that love is conditional, something that can be given and taken away. But then, in a quiet moment of reflection or in the whisper of a prayer, they begin to sense the depth of God's love for them. It's not a love that judges or keeps score, but one that says, "I see you and I love you just as you are." This realization starts to melt the ice around their heart, bringing warmth and comfort where there was once only pain. This love is transformative. It begins to seep into every part of their being, filling the empty spaces and mending the broken pieces. They come to understand that God's love is the answer to the longing they felt all their lives. It's the love that gives them the courage to face each day, knowing they are cherished beyond measure. And as they bask in this love, they find that the anguish, the sadness, the anxiety, and the weariness begin to lose their grip. They are no longer defined by their struggles but by the love of the one who calls them beloved. In the journey of an anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart, there comes a moment when one must pause and express gratitude for the strength they found in God. It's easy to get caught up in the weight of our burdens, but when we look back, we begin to see how far we've come, not by our own might, but by the grace and strength that God has provided. This realization sparks a deep sense of thankfulness, a recognition that even in the darkest hours, we were never truly alone. Think of someone who has faced trial after trial, each one seemingly more challenging than the last. They may have wondered at times how they would make it through, but somehow they did. And now, as they reflect, they see the evidence of God's hand at work in their lives. Every step they took, every tear they shed, God was there, giving them the strength to keep moving forward. It's like a tapestry being woven with threads of endurance, hope, and faith, each stitch a testimony to God's sustaining power. Gratitude for this strength is not just a feeling, it's a practice. It's waking up each morning and acknowledging that the breath in their lungs is a gift, that the ability to face another day is a testament to God's faithfulness. It's saying, "Thank you, Lord, for being my rock when I felt like crumbling." This gratitude shifts their perspective from focusing on what they lack to celebrating the strength they've been given. And as they express this gratitude, they find that it fuels them, providing even more strength for the journey ahead. The act of thanking God becomes a source of strength in itself, a reminder that they are equipped to face whatever comes next. There is a deep and abiding trust that grows in the heart when one realizes that God's providence is at work, even when circumstances seem chaotic. For those with an anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart, trusting in divine providence means believing that there is a greater plan at play, orchestrated by a loving Creator who knows the end from the beginning. It's the understanding that every twist and turn in their journey, no matter how perplexing, is woven into a tapestry that only God can see fully. Consider the person who has faced countless setbacks, each one a blow to their spirit. Perhaps they've lost opportunities, endured broken relationships, or faced financial hardships. To the natural eye, it might seem like everything is spiraling out of control. But in the midst of these trials, they begin to sense a quiet assurance, a whisper from God saying, "I am with you and I am working all things together for your good." This is the essence of divine providence, where even the seemingly random events of life are guided by a purposeful hand. Trusting in this providence is not about having all the answers or understanding every detail of what's happening. It's about leaning into the truth that God is sovereign and good, even when life doesn't make sense. It's choosing to believe that every closed door, every detour, is part of a divine rerouting to something greater. As they release their need for control and place their trust in God's plan, they find a sense of peace and security. They learn to rest in the knowledge that God is not only aware of their struggles but is actively involved in guiding them toward a future filled with hope and promise. Anxiety is a heavy burden, one that often keeps the anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart in a state of unrest. Letting go of anxiety is not an easy task, especially when it has become a constant companion in the journey of life. However, God invites each person to cast their anxieties upon Him, to exchange their restless thoughts for His peace. It's an act of surrender, of opening their hands and releasing what they've been gripping so tightly, trusting that God is big enough to handle it all. Think about someone who wakes up each morning with a knot in their stomach, already dreading the day ahead. The what-ifs and what-nows swirl around in their mind, stealing the joy of the present moment. They've tried everything to control their circumstances, only to find that their efforts leave them more exhausted and anxious. When they finally decide to bring these fears to God, it's not just a casual mention but a deliberate laying down of each concern. It's saying, "Lord, I give this to you because I can't carry it any longer." This letting go is a daily, sometimes hourly, practice. It might mean starting the day with a simple prayer of release, or pausing throughout the day to breathe deeply and remind themselves that God is in control. It's not about ignoring the realities of life but about choosing not to let them dictate their peace. As they continue to practice this, they start to notice a shift. The anxiety that once held them captive begins to lose its grip, replaced by a growing sense of calm. They find that God's peace is not a fleeting feeling but a steady undercurrent, guiding them through the ups and downs of each day. In moments of vulnerability, the anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart yearns for protection, a shelter where it can find safety from the storms of life. God offers this very refuge, a place where one can hide and feel the assurance of His divine shield. It's not about escaping reality but about finding a fortress where the soul can rest, knowing that it is guarded by the one who is both strong and loving. When the heart seeks this protection, It becomes like a child running into the arms of a parent, finding comfort and security. Imagine someone who feels attacked on all sides, whether by external pressures, internal fears, or the lies that whisper in the quiet of the night. They might feel exposed and defenseless, like they're standing in the middle of a battlefield without armor. But in seeking God's protection, they discover that they are not alone. God places His arms around them, like a fortress that stands tall and unmovable. It's the understanding that while they may face trials, they are surrounded by the presence of the Almighty, who promises to guard their hearts and minds. This protection is not just about being shielded from harm but about being enveloped in God's love and care. It's waking up each day and placing their trust in the one who goes before them, who stands beside them, and who watches over them. They can face challenges, knowing that God is their protector, their defender against every threat, seen or unseen. And as they rest in this truth, they find courage rising within them. They are emboldened to step out, to face each day, not because they are fearless, but because they know that they are fiercely protected by the one who never slumbers nor sleeps. In the depths of turmoil, when the heart is anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, there is a deep-seated longing for serenity, a stillness that transcends understanding. Serenity is more than just a moment of calm. It's a state of being where one feels anchored, no matter how tumultuous life becomes. It's a place where the soul can take a breath, find its center, and know that it is held by something greater than itself. God offers this serenity, a divine gift to those who cry out for it with a heart open and yearning. Picture a person whose life has been marked by chaos and unrest. Perhaps they've been through a season where nothing seems to go right, where every corner they turn leads to more uncertainty. They find themselves constantly on edge, their thoughts racing, their heart pounding. When they come to God, they are not looking for a quick fix but for a deep-seated tranquility. They whisper a simple prayer, "Lord, grant me serenity," and in that whisper, something shifts. It's as if the storm within them begins to quiet, not because the external circumstances have changed, but because they have found a new anchor. Seeking this serenity is like learning to breathe again. It's choosing to pause in the midst of the chaos and draw near to God, to let His peace wash over them. It might involve practices like meditative prayer, where they sit quietly and allow God's presence to fill them. Or it could be taking moments throughout the day to remind themselves that they are not in control, but God is. As they cultivate this practice, they find that serenity becomes a part of their everyday life. It doesn't mean that all their problems disappear, but that they now face them from a place of inner calm and strength, knowing that God's serenity is their constant companion. For a heart that has been anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, hope can seem like a distant memory, a light that has dimmed under the weight of life's trials. Yet, in God's presence, there is a promise of renewal, a rekindling of hope that speaks to the deepest parts of the soul. It's not just about a fleeting moment of optimism but a profound assurance that things can change, that there is a purpose and a plan even in the midst of pain. This renewal of hope is like a fresh breeze that revives the spirit, reminding them that the story is not over yet. Consider someone who has faced repeated disappointments, each one chipping away at their hope until it feels like there's nothing left. They've prayed, they've waited, and yet the answers seem delayed, the future uncertain. When they turn to God in this state, they are not looking for empty reassurances but for a hope that is rooted in something unshakable. It's here that God begins to breathe new life into their weary heart, planting seeds of hope that start to grow even in the most barren soil. They begin to sense that God is not done with them, that there is more to come. In moments of deep despair, when the heart is anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, the affirmation of God's presence becomes a lifeline. It is the quiet assurance that no matter how dark the valley may seem, God is there, walking beside them. This truth is like a light piercing through the shadows, offering comfort and guidance when everything else feels uncertain. It's a reminder that they are not alone in their journey, that God is intimately aware of every tear, every sigh, and every silent plea for help. Imagine someone who feels utterly forsaken, as if the world has turned its back on them. They might be struggling with feelings of abandonment, questioning where God is in the midst of their pain. Yet, in the stillness of prayer or in a moment of quiet reflection, they begin to sense a gentle whisper in their soul, a reminder that God has never left their side. It's in the small things, the warmth of the sun on their face, the embrace of a loved one, the peace that unexpectedly floods their heart, that they start to recognize the signs of God's presence. Affirming God's presence is an ongoing practice. It's about training the heart to see beyond the immediate circumstances and recognize the hand of God in the everyday. This might involve taking time each day to pause and reflect on where they've seen God at work, even in the smallest of ways. It's like finding hidden treasures in the midst of a wilderness, reminders that God is not distant but very near. As they cultivate this awareness, they begin to walk with a new confidence, knowing that God is not just a distant deity but an ever-present companion, guiding and sustaining them through every season of life. When the heart is anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, there comes a point where the spirit feels drained, almost as if it has run dry. It is in these moments that the soul cries out for renewal, for a fresh outpouring of God's life-giving presence. This spiritual renewal is more than just a fleeting feeling of inspiration. It's a deep, transformative encounter that breathes new life into the soul. It's like water to a parched land, reviving what seemed lifeless and allowing it to flourish once again. Think of someone who has been walking through a season of spiritual dryness. Perhaps they've been going through the motions, attending church, saying their prayers, but feeling disconnected, as if their relationship with God has become routine. They long for that spark, that sense of closeness they once felt. When they come to God with this longing, they're not asking for a temporary emotional high but for a profound awakening of their spirit. They pray, "Lord, renew my spirit, fill me afresh with your presence." And in doing so, they open themselves up to receive what only God can give. This renewal is often accompanied by a new sense of purpose and direction. It might begin with a simple moment of surrender, where they let go of the distractions and the things that have been weighing them down. They make room for God, and as they do, they start to feel a shift. It could be a new passion for prayer, a desire to dive deeper into the Word, or a fresh boldness to step out in faith. This is not about striving but about being filled, allowing God to replenish what has been depleted. As they embrace this renewal, they find their spirit lifted, their hearts stirred, and their relationship with God reignited, ready to walk with Him in a new and vibrant way. In the journey of life, with its trials and tribulations, there is a profound sense of peace that comes from recognizing and being grateful for God's presence. For the anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart, this gratitude acts as a balm, soothing the soul and reminding them that they are not alone. When they pause to give thanks for God's constant companionship, they begin to see their circumstances through a new lens, realizing that His presence has been a source of comfort and strength, even when they were unaware. Picture someone who has been walking through a valley of deep sorrow or uncertainty. They may have felt abandoned or forgotten, but in a moment of stillness, they begin to reflect on the ways God has been with them. It's in the small mercies, the unexpected kindness of a friend, the words of a song that spoke directly to their heart, the gentle nudge to keep going, that they see evidence of His hand at work. As they give thanks, their perspective shifts. What once felt like a journey taken in solitude now reveals itself as a path walked hand in hand with God. Gratitude for God's presence is a daily practice. It's about taking time, even in the midst of busyness and stress, to acknowledge that He is near. They might start each day with a simple prayer of thanks, "Lord, thank you for being with me." Or they may choose to keep a gratitude journal, jotting down moments where they sensed God's touch in their lives. This act of thanksgiving not only honors God but also strengthens their awareness of His presence. As they cultivate a heart of gratitude, they find that their focus shifts from what they lack to the abundance of God's love and care that surrounds them every day. In the midst of trials, when the heart is anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, there's a powerful truth that often needs to be spoken over one's life: the affirmation of victory through God. This isn't a victory that comes from human strength or effort, but a triumph that God has already secured. It's the declaration that despite the struggles, despite the dark nights of the soul, there is a victory that awaits them because God is greater than any obstacle they face. This affirmation is not just a hopeful wish, it's a confident proclamation of what God has promised. Imagine a person who has been fighting battles on multiple fronts, emotional, spiritual, or even physical. They felt beaten down, as if every step forward comes with 2 steps back. Yet, in the midst of this struggle, they choose to affirm the victory that God has for them. They declare, "In Christ I am more than a conqueror. This battle is not mine but the Lord's." This declaration is not rooted in denial of their circumstances but in the unshakable truth of God's Word. It's the understanding that while they may feel defeated in the moment, the war has already been won through Christ. This affirmation of victory brings a shift in perspective. It empowers them to stand firm even when the waves crash around them. They begin to live from a place of triumph rather than defeat, knowing that God is fighting on their behalf. This might mean speaking scriptures of victory over their lives like, "The Lord is my strength and my shield. In Him my heart trusts." It's in these moments of declaration that they start to see a change, not always in their circumstances, but in their spirit. They are no longer victims of their situations but victors in God, holding on to the promise that He will see them through to the other side. In times of confusion and uncertainty, when the heart is anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, there's a deep need for wisdom. It's not just knowledge or understanding of facts but a divine insight that comes from God alone. This wisdom is what guides a person through the fog of doubt and fear, helping them make decisions that lead to peace and purpose. When they ask God for wisdom, they are seeking a clarity that surpasses human reasoning, trusting that He will direct their steps in the right direction. Think of someone standing at a crossroads, overwhelmed by the choices before them. They've tried to analyze every option, weighed the pros and cons, yet still feel lost in the complexity of it all. In this moment, they turn to God, saying, "Lord, grant me wisdom to see beyond what is in front of me." It's not just about making the right choice but about aligning their heart with God's will. This act of seeking wisdom is an acknowledgement that they need guidance beyond their own understanding, a humility that opens the door for God to lead. Asking for wisdom is a continual process. It might involve spending time in prayer, asking God to reveal His will in every situation. They could meditate on scriptures that promise God's guidance, like, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach." They begin to notice that as they seek this divine wisdom, they start to make decisions with a newfound confidence and peace. It's not that every answer is immediately clear, but they sense a guiding hand that leads them one step at a time. In this journey, they learn to trust in the wisdom that comes not from themselves, but from the one who sees the beginning and the end. In the midst of life's struggles, where the heart is anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, there is a profound sense of gratitude that arises when one reflects on the grace of God. This grace is unmerited, a gift freely given to those who feel they have nothing left to offer. It's the realization that despite their flaws, their failures, and their doubts, God's grace is sufficient. This grace not only covers them but empowers them, reminding them that they are loved and accepted just as they are. Consider someone who has been weighed down by guilt or shame, feeling as though they've fallen short time and time again. They might have carried this burden for years, believing that they are beyond redemption. But when they come to God, they encounter a grace that wipes the slate clean. It's not about what they've done or haven't done, but about what God has already done for them. This grace is a reminder that they don't have to strive for God's approval. They already have it. As they give thanks for this grace, they start to experience a freedom they've never known before. Expressing gratitude for grace is more than a one-time event. It's a lifestyle. It's waking up each day and acknowledging, "Lord, thank you for your grace that covers me." It's choosing to live in the light of that grace, allowing it to shape their actions and attitudes. They begin to see their life, not as a series of mistakes and failures, but as a testament to the power of God's love and mercy. This gratitude transforms their outlook, giving them the courage to move forward, not in their own strength, but in the grace that sustains them. And as they walk in this grace, they find that it overflows into every area of their life, touching those around them with the same love and acceptance they have received. In the quiet moments of the night, when the heart is anguished, sad, anxious, and weary, there is a longing for lasting peace. Not just a temporary relief or a fleeting sense of calm, but a profound, enduring peace that settles deep within the soul. This is the kind of peace that only God can provide, a peace that transcends circumstances and speaks to the very core of one's being. When one cries out for this peace, they are asking God to still the storms within, to replace the turmoil with a tranquility that can only come from Him. Think of someone whose mind is constantly racing, filled with worries about the future, regrets about the past, and pressures of the present. They've tried everything to quiet the noise, distractions, self-help techniques, even sheer willpower, but nothing seems to bring the lasting peace they crave. In their desperation, they turn to God, asking, "Lord, grant me your peace that surpasses all understanding." It's in this cry that they begin to sense a shift. Slowly, the storm inside them begins to calm, not because their circumstances have changed, but because they've allowed God's peace to take root in their heart. Seeking lasting peace is an ongoing journey. It involves daily surrender, choosing to lay their anxieties at God's feet and trusting Him with the outcome. They might find solace in scripture such as, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you." They carry these words with them, allowing them to anchor their thoughts and emotions throughout the day. As they practice resting in God's peace, they start to notice a change. The things that once stirred anxiety now seem less daunting. The peace they experience is not a mere absence of conflict but a presence of God's assurance. It becomes a foundation upon which they stand, a reminder that no matter what comes their way, God's peace is their constant companion. As the journey comes to a close, for the anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart, there's a profound act of faith that wraps everything together. It's a faith that declares, even in the face of uncertainty, "I trust you, God." It's a faith that rises above the doubts, the fears, and the unanswered questions, choosing to rest in the knowledge that God is good and His plans are perfect. This closing in faith is not a finality but an invitation to continue walking with God, believing that He holds every tomorrow. Imagine a person who has walked through deep valleys and climbed steep mountains, carrying the weight of life's challenges. They've wrestled with their emotions, questioned their path, and sought answers in the silence. But now, as they stand on the cusp of a new season, they choose to close this chapter in faith. They say, "Lord, I don't know what lies ahead, but I know You go before me. I place my life in Your hands." It's in this act of surrender that they find peace. It's not about knowing all the answers but about trusting the One who does. Living out this faith is a daily commitment. It's waking up each morning and choosing to believe that God is in control, even when the circumstances say otherwise. It might involve speaking words of faith over their life, declaring God's promises even when they can't yet see them fulfilled. It's about holding on to hope, knowing that God is writing a story that is far greater than they could ever imagine. This faith becomes a guiding light, a source of strength and courage. It propels them forward, encouraging them to keep pressing on, not because they have all the strength but because they know the One who gives it. And so, with faith in their hearts, they step into the next part of their journey, confident that God is with them every step of the way. Now that you've heard this powerful message, the next step is yours to take. Do you want to keep carrying the burdens of an anguished, sad, anxious, and weary heart on your own? Or are you ready to lay them at the feet of the One who promises to give you strength? Imagine the relief of waking up each day knowing that God is holding you, guiding you, and giving you the peace that surpasses all understanding. It's not a distant hope, it's a promise. How would your life change if you began each day with this prayer, surrendering your worries and trusting in God's protection, wisdom, and grace? What if you decided right now that this season of struggle doesn't define you, but the victory that God has for you does? This is the invitation before you, to embrace the strength and peace that only God can offer and to live a life renewed by His presence. If you're ready for that transformation, don't wait. Let this be the start of something new in your life. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because together, we're going to continue exploring ways to deepen your connection with God and find real, lasting peace. There's so much more to come and you don't want to miss it. Let's walk this journey together, step by step, towards a stronger heart and a more peaceful life.